Going to welcome in our first guest of the night. Doug Gladstone is on the phone with us from his home in New York State, and Doug has been nice enough to take a couple of minutes with us. And as we were mentioning, his book out April 14th of this year, A Bitter Cup of Coffee, How MLB and the Players Association Threw 874 Retirees a Curve. Doug, Steve Lennox on the phone with you from New Haven, Connecticut. Nick out in Chicago. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm very well. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate the opportunity to come on the show and talk about the book and talk about the issues that the book raises.
Now, if you would, we'll start, because we had a brief conversation earlier today. Your book was released on April 14th, and I really got a kick out of you coming up with that date for the release. And you put everything together with this book yourself, didn't use an outside publisher. And if you would, also talk about whether or not you've been happy with the success since April and the book release as well, and how things have gone with it.
Well, let me take the first part of the question first. To any history buff who knows April 14th, that was when the Titanic actually went down. So you might not think it would portend very well for a release of anyone's first book, but as it happens, Marvin Miller's birthday, MLA's father's birthday, is April 14th. So I kind of thought it would be a good date to put the book out. I'm very pleased with the critical and commercial success of the book. I didn't write it, of course, for those reasons. I wrote the book because I felt there was a travesty and injustice. Pick your adjective, pick your adverb. That these ball players who played largely from 1947 through 1979 were being hosed by and large. And I'm a child of the television generation, and for you and your listeners, I'm sure you recall the popular TV show The Fugitive, the late David Jansen as Dr. Richard Kimball, who was falsely accused of murdering his wife. Well, I always felt that someone had to tip the scales for that character, and in a hokey sort of way, if you can allow me to make the analogy, I'm trying to do that for these ball players. They gave me hours of entertainment while growing up. I think baseball, I don't think you'll get any argument from anyone on your program today. Baseball is our national pastime. It has entertained throngs of people. It did so for me growing up, and in some small way, I just wanted to help facilitate a dialogue, shape the debate. The collective bargaining negotiations for the next CBA, which expires in December 2011, is about to begin in spring training of 2011, and that's partly one of the reasons why I did not go with any name brand imprint, if you will. A lot of those publishers, and I won't, to be fair, I won't tell you who was ready to offer me a contract because it's not fair to them. They're not here to defend themselves, but they wanted me to sign on the dotted line, and their timetable was too slow. They wanted to publish my book in September or October of 2011. I wanted to influence and impact the debate way before then, and in short, that's why I self-published the book.
Hey, Doug, for people listening that aren't familiar, give a quick history of the plan itself and basically what the overall point of the book is.
No problem. In 1947, the Players Pension Fund was established. You had to be on a roster of a major league team on the first day of the season that year to qualify, and you needed 5 years to vest. In other words, to be eligible to collect a pension when you would ultimately retire from the game. We flash forward 22 years later, in 1969, that requirement was lowered to 4 years to vest. And then finally in 1980, as you and your listeners probably recall, there was an averted strike. The players had actually gone, I don't know why they did this, they went out on strike. They canceled the last 92 exhibition games in spring training of 1980. Popular opinion says that they could have had more of an impact if they had maybe gone on strike the first week or two of the season, but they did what they did. And 7 weeks later, Memorial Day, 1980, they were ready to go out on strike over, of course, the nuclear issue of the time, which was direct compensation of free agents. And then the owners' negotiator, Ray Grebe, the former FAA negotiator, made Marvin Miller, the first executive director of the Players Union, an incredible offer. He said, basically, we're going to confer instant pension eligibility to all your union dues-paying members. And all you're going to need is one game for medical benefits and 43 games, essentially a quarter of a season, for an annuity. Well, Marvin Miller, who, by the way, I did interview, was really a great honor to speak with Mr. Miller. He said, how could we turn that down? It wouldn't have been in the best interests of our dues-paying members at that time. And that's the way it's been ever since 1980, basically for the past 3 decades. The problem with that, as I'm sure you've alluded to already at the outset of your of tonight's program, is that they never retroactively amended all those ball players like David Clyde, the former Texas Ranger bonus baby, ball players like Pat Darcy, the man who gave up Carlton Fisk's home run in Game 6 of the 1975 World Series. All those ball players who had more than 1 day's service credit, but less than 4 years. They fell through the cracks, and that's the group that we're talking about. In February of 2000, there were about 1,400 of them. In October of 2003, there were 1,053. At the time my book was published, 874 of them were still alive. On May 13th, we lost J.D. Schlater to your listeners. Any Astro fans out there, he was an outfielder for the Astros. He passed away on May 13th at the age of 61. He suffered from a neurological impairment called ataxia, and his widow, Gail, Nick, Steve, she told me, and you could hear it through the phone. You could hear her tears. Mr. Gladstone, she said, we begged Major League Baseball. We begged them to allow us to be covered under the medical plan. We even offered to pay the insurance premiums, and they said no. And that's really the issue in a nutshell.
Now, when the pension plan was amended, what was the involvement of the retroactivity in terms of the Negro League players as well?
That's a good question. Most of the ball players, and in fact, you're from Chicago, so you know Jimmy Qualls. Jimmy Qualls is the one who basically, I was writing an article for Baseball Digest last year, was published in September, and he's the one who told me about this issue. I had no clue, and I doubt most fans know about this issue. He told me that, look, all things being equal, I could accept the fact that I'm not getting a pension. But, as you correctly point out, there were 2 seminal events in 1997 that made these ball players really get their dander up. The first event, in October of 1997, Major League Baseball unilaterally, of their own volition, they did a very nice thing. I remember at the outset I said that all the ball players had to be on the Major League roster on first day of the season in 1947. Well, all those pre-1947 players like Pete Koskarot and Dolph Camille, they, got their noses out of joint. They said, what are you saying, that our contributions to the game don't matter? And they were awarded quarterly payments of $2,500 each in October of 1997. And they weren't really pensions. They're life annuities. They would pass when the player passed. The more important event, as you alluded to, is that in January of 1997, the owners at their executive council meeting in Arizona conferred pensions, or let's call them what they're legally called, charitable donations, on the veterans of the Negro Leagues. Now, that's a great thing. I want to make that crystal clear. That is a wonderful thing. Let's face it, baseball during the 20s, 30s, and 40s was just a mirror institution for the segregation that was going on